Hey everybody, this is Kohdok here, and I'm showing off something cool today because it's something that right now at home you guys can print out and play for free. It's the Exceed fighting system from Level 99 Games. Now, what I have here is the Street Fighter demo deck, Ryu versus Ken, and this is the physical copy of the deck, but it's actually possible for you to go online, links in the doobly-doo, and print out the stuff directly, the sort of proxy cards. So what you're going to do is you're going to want 2 stacks of 30 card sleeves stuffed with some cards that you don't really need. You're going to print out the sheets from the doobly-doo in the quantity that it says. You're going to cut them out, and you're going to stick them into the card sleeves to make an entire deck of proxy cards. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term proxy cards, but it's how you print cards you don't have, but that will enable you to have everything you need to play the Ryu versus Ken game. So what this is it's a fighting game system. Believe it or not, the Angry Joe Show featured a board game that used a similar system, but this is that boiled down to its essence. What it is a 30 card deck per player, although each character also has some special stats and special abilities. And the cool thing about it is it has kind of a crazy action system. It borrows a lot from UFS, but it kind of has, again, those things from UFS boiled down to its essence. Now, this third little stack we have here is a set of arena cards. What you're doing with these is you lay them out to build an arena, although if there's anything that NFL Rush Zone taught me, it's that building an arena out of cards kind of stinks because they tend to slide all over the place. I don't know, maybe if I could make something like, yeah, like that. Each player starts with 30 life points and 5 cards in their starting hand, with the player going second getting to draw 1 additional card at the start of the game. Now, on these cards, you're going to see little red lightning bolts and little blue rectangles on them with a number inside of it. That is how many cards you are supposed to discard in order to pay that cost. Red lightning bolts can be paid for with either cards from your hand or from your gauge, more on the gauge later, and blue rectangles have to be paid for using only cards from your gauge. Now, funny thing about the red lightning bolts is that any of these red-topped ultra cards count as 2 lightning bolts, so good thing to keep in mind. They're both red, easy to remember. Now, on your turn, you get to perform 1 action, and the action can be a number of things, and whenever you perform an action, unless the action was the strike action or included the strike action, you draw a card afterwards. You can prepare, which means you skip your turn to draw 2 cards instead of 1. You can change cards, which is paying an amount of red lightning bolt, equal to the number of cards you want to draw instead. You can exceed, which involves paying this gauge cost down here to flip your character over into their stronger form. You can reshuffle your deck, which is to add your discard pile to your deck, shuffle it together, although you can only do that once, and if you deck out once, that counts as your automatic reshuffle. You can move, which is another red lightning bolt cost to move your character a number of spaces. Certain characters, like Ryu and Ken, both have a couple of special actions they can do, and these count as regular non-strike actions. You perform their actions, such as Ryu being able to move 1, and then you draw a card. In this case, Ken seems a bit stronger because he gets to advance 1 and then draw a card. Now, closing means he can only move towards Ryu, but that extra card seems like Ken has a bit of an edge in the early game here. Certain cards also have something called a critical cost, and when you have that, you pay the critical cost listed on the character card, and man, there sure are a lot of things that use red lightning bolts and blue squares that don't have them. It sure would be nice if there was a way that I could, yeah, like that. You can boost, which I'll talk about later, or you can strike, which is the final thing. Now, when you declare a strike as your action, that's when the real fighting begins. You take the card you want to strike with and place it face down in front of you, and your opponent must do the same. If either player doesn't have any cards in their hand, or if they want to, they can instead take the top card of their deck as their strike card, performing what is called a wild swing. Now, what happens is both of you flip over your cards at the same time, and whoever's card has the highest speed goes first. Of course, there are occasionally some actions that happen before the strike is determined, in which case you would do those now. Now, determining whose strike goes first is determined by the speed stat. Whoever has the highest speed stat delivers their blow first. Of course, you have to check the range. For example, a card with a range of 1 to 2 can either strike a guy right next to him, or strike a guy up to 1 square in between the two of you. Then you check the damage. You inflict that much damage to your opponent, minus however much armor is on the opponent's card. And then finally, you check the guard stat. The guard stat is how much damage that strike can take before it flinches. If you manage to hit over your opponent's guard, you can't match it. If it matches, then your opponent's attack still gets to go through. If you hit first and go over your opponent's guard after armor penalties are deducted, then your opponent's attack whiffs and does nothing because they flinch, like in a fighting game. However, if your opponent manages to withstand the guard, then they perform their attack, and both of you exchange damage. Afterwards, there's a cleanup step where the card is moved to their discard piles. Any strike attacks that successfully conclude, whether they deal damage or not, get added to that player's gauge area. Now, the gauge area is used to pay for several things. It can be used to pay to exceed a character, which flips them over and gives them a stronger effect. For example, Ryu now draws a card along with his move action. You can also use it to pay for lightning bolt costs, but its most prominent use is to pay for ultra cards. Now, ultra cards are really strong strike cards with the red top, and they have a gauge cost to them. You must pay that gauge cost when you attack, or else the attack cannot be done. It becomes an invalid play, and you must wild swing from the top of your deck. If you wild swing an ultra card, but you don't want to use it, you can opt out of it. However, if you played it from your hand, and you have enough gauge to pay for it, you have to play it. So be careful when you think about it. There is also a neat trick you can do called an EX attack. If you have two copies of the same card in your hand, you can perform an EX strike by playing them both at once. What happens is when the strike gets revealed, you choose one and discard it in order to give the other one +1 to all stats except for range. It basically becomes a stronger attack. And yes, you can do this with ultra cards too, although you don't have to pay the gauge cost for the one you discard. However, you'll notice each card also has a little yellow box on the bottom. That little yellow box is called the boost effect. Rather than playing the card as a strike, you can instead play the card as a boost, paying its little red lightning bolt cost and using its effect immediately before discarding it. Although there are some that have a plus icon that stay in play until the next time a strike happens, in which case they power up that strike and then go away. Boost effects are pretty cool, and I like the fact that it gives you two cards in one. That, to me, is just such a cool idea. There are some neat things that can happen here. First of all, there are some things that allow you to enhance the stats or allow you to ignore certain things such as guard. A couple unusual things about the strike cards that I don't think I really like. If a card doesn't have a stat, like an armor stat or a guard stat, they just kind of leave it off the card. I wish they were still on the card and said 0 so that information is still there right in front of me. Also, as a fighting game player, I think guard and armor should be switched, because guard is where you defend yourself to reduce damage, but when people who play fighting games think of armor, they think of super armor, which is specifically the ability for a fighting game character to ignore an attack and continue with what they're doing. Zangief is very famous for having loads of super armor. And so yeah, there you have it. The goal of the game is to either reduce your opponent's life points from 30 to 0, or to make them deck out twice. So something that I think is really interesting about the cards in this game is that both fighters actually have a set of generic cards that are common to both decks. And I think that's kind of a neat idea. Each character also gets like a bunch of unique cards, like both Ryu and Ken have their own version of Shoryu Ken here, but the thing that I think is interesting about that is it seems like it's designed to be like a modular system, where you have a set of cards that all do the same thing, which are universal across all characters, and then you have some sets of cards that are unique to the individuals. I think that has a lot of potential. I'm looking at Exceed's website, and it doesn't look like they're actually doing that. It looks like the characters and the decks are being sold as standalones or in sets of 4, and it says complete decks, which tells me they're just throwing in 4 of these decks, but I think it would be neat if they could do something similar to like what Munchkin or Flux does, which is they actually sell like in like little like booster pack sized things that contain upgrades to the base game. Like you could include characters that only come with their special cards, and you're supposed to stir them in with the generic cards in order to get what you need. I think that would be a pretty neat idea. I don't know if level 99 is not going to do it. Then maybe some other game can do it where you have a modular system where it's really cheap to just get the characters you want, or maybe make the characters random, like a Pirates game, like you get a character and their full set, but you don't know which character you're going to get until you buy the pack. That might be a cool idea. It seems interesting. Like I said, I've seen this sort of system also used in a tabletop game. Maybe I'll link to that, although Angry Joe and them, they like to swear, so maybe I won't. But, yeah, like I said, you can go ahead, download the demo deck, you can print it out, proxy it up, and give it a try. So that is the Exceed Fighting System by Level 99 Games, and until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.